As Israel prepares to invade Rafah, violate Joe Biden's red line and kill who knows how many more thousands of innocent men, women and children in Gaza, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. We need to talk about the hostages. Because the Israelis say this is all about the hostages. They say we don't talk about the hostages enough. So let's do that. Let's talk today about the hostages, because there are three very important things they don't tell you about the hostages. First, for everyone who believes that Benjamin Netanyahu and his government of far-right fascists and racists are fighting their war in Gaza in order to rescue the hostages, how do they explain the fact that Netanyahu had a chance to bring all of the civilian hostages home right at the very beginning? Those aren't my words. That's not my opinion. It's the view of Chaim Rubenstein, who until very recently was a spokesman for the families of the Israeli hostages, and who said last week, quote, "We learned that Hamas offered on October 9th or 10th to release all the captive civilians in its hands if the IDF did not enter the Gaza Strip, but the government rejected the offer." In fact, the Washington Post reported on a similar proposal at the end of October, saying Hamas was proposing to release all foreign civilian hostages in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. Israeli civilian hostages would be released if additional demands were met, he said, including the release of Palestinian women and children in Israeli prisons and the opening of the Rafah border crossing. Second, for everyone who pops up on my Twitter feed to still tell me, well, Hamas could end this war if they just released all the hostages, have they paid any attention to anything the Israeli government has actually said on this subject? Israeli officials have said time and again that the war won't end until Hamas is destroyed, regardless of whether the hostages are released. Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's finance minister, made clear this week he was opposed to any hostage release deal that stopped Israel from going into Rafah. Now, you might say, that's just Smotrich, he's not in charge. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also said this week that he would invade Rafah with or without a deal on the hostages. His words, not mine. And third, something that keeps being left out of the mainstream media, ignored by all those who claim to care about hostages, is that the hostages at the core of this conflict, at the heart of this current round of killing and violence, aren't just Israelis, they're Palestinians too. Yes, Palestinians too, because while we're all aware of the fact that around 250 hostages were taken from Israel by Hamas and other armed groups on October the 7th, including, shamefully, children, and around 130 hostages remain in captivity in Gaza, we don't really mention the hundreds, thousands of Palestinians who've been rounded up, detained, held without trial, tortured, sexually abused, without any charges, let alone any convictions, in Israeli prisons. And I'm not even talking about just since October the 7th. I'm talking about before October the 7th. According to the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, on the eve of the October 7th attacks, at the end of September 2023, Israel was holding over 1,300 Palestinians as hostages in what they conveniently call administrative detention. Around half of them for a year or more, and 23 of them, shamefully, children, held without trial, without charge. The reality is that under international law, hostage-taking is a war crime whether Palestinians or Israelis do it, just as intentionally targeting and killing civilians is a war crime whether Palestinians or Israelis do it. So, to summarize then, the Netanyahu government chose not to do a deal to release the Israeli hostages, according to the spokesman for their family members. Even if Hamas were to release the hostages tomorrow morning, Israel has no plans to end its assault on Gaza. And, the biggest issue of all perhaps, the hostages aren't just on the Israeli side, they're on the Palestinian side too. Those are the facts. The objective, demonstrable, undeniable facts. And look, this is a human tragedy. Many innocent Israelis are wrongly being held hostage in Gaza, and many Israeli families are waiting for a father, a brother, a loved one to come home. And to them I say I stand in solidarity, in humanity, with you. I say free the hostages, Israeli and Palestinian. But, and there is a but, as the Israeli military prepares to wipe out Rafah and kill thousands more people, remember this: when the bad faith apologists for Israel pop up on TV or online to justify that violence, and to robotically and cynically repeat, what about the hostages? Ignoring all of the three things that I just pointed out to you, treat that dishonest refrain with the contempt it deserves.